faithfully delivering value and exploring great books worldwide. Hi, this is Sally's Book Club. Today, we're interpreting the book called The Count of Monte Cristo for you. The author is Alexandre Dumas, a 19th century French Romantic writer. Speaking of Alexandre Dumas, everyone knows him. He's a world-renowned French writer who wrote over 100 novels, and the most popular one is The Count of Monte Cristo, which we're discussing today. Dumas is also called the king of popular fiction, and The Count of Monte Cristo is hailed as a masterpiece of world popular fiction. This novel has greatly influenced later writers. For example, Jin Young not only absorbed its techniques, but even directly borrowed the plot of the protagonist being imprisoned and used it in his novel Lian Cheng Jue. Jin Young's tribute to Alexandre Dumas is a homage to a predecessor and a strong affirmation of the value of literary heritage. And the tribute from ordinary readers to the Count of Monte Cristo, that's over 100 years of nonstop reading. Since its publication in the 1840s, this novel has been translated into dozens of languages and adapted into various art forms like stage plays, movies, and TV shows, remaining popular ever since. The Chinese translations of the novel number over 100. Just imagine how popular it is in China. The Count of Monte Cristo is a massive, popular novel, over 1,000 pages long with intricate plots and constant climaxes. As a popular legend novel, its theme is quite straightforward. Simply put, it's about punishing evil, promoting good, and upholding justice. Therefore, some Chinese translations are titled Christ Mountain Revenge Story. Next, let's follow Alexandre Dumas's pen to experience the thrilling legend of the Count of Monte Cristo. The protagonist of The Count of Monte Cristo is named Edmond Dantès. At the start of the story, at just 19 years old, he serves as the acting captain of a cargo ship and has just returned from abroad to the port of Marseille, France. Originally, he was the first mate on the ship. Unexpectedly, the old captain fell ill during the voyage and, before dying, appointed Dantès as acting captain. He entrusted Dantès to sail the ship to a small island to meet the imprisoned Napoleon and deliver a letter from Napoleon to his confidant in Paris. Dantès fulfilled the old captain's request. Then, returning to Marseille to deliver Napoleon's letter was just a minor episode in Dantès' journey home. But please note, this is the source of his future catastrophe. Young Dantès returns to his hometown, and the first thing he wants to do is marry his beloved fiancée, Mercedes. But at the wedding, several police suddenly appeared and announced Dantès' arrest. Dantès cried out his innocence, completely bewildered. Turns out, someone wrote an anonymous letter accusing him of involvement in Napoleon's conspiracy. There were two informers. One was Danglars, a crew member on Dantès' ship who envied his promotion. The other was Fernand, a suitor of his fiancée Mercedes who hated his rival Dantès. These two conspired to deliver Dantès to the authorities. The prosecutor handling Dantès' case was Villefort. Initially, he intended to grandly release the innocent Dantès, but he suddenly discovered that Napoleon's letter entrusted to Dantès bore his own father's name. A grave revelation. Villefort remained outwardly calm, but immediately sentenced the unsuspecting Dantès to life imprisonment, while the naive Dantès remained clueless. He expected imminent release, but only when armed guards took him to the grim Chateau d'If. Prison did he realize his freedom was gone. In prison, fantasies of release and longing for his fiancée sustained Dantès through endless days and nights. Over a decade passed, and the endless imprisonment finally crushed all hope. He resolved to starve himself to death. After days of starvation, near death, Dantès suddenly heard digging sounds from the next cell in the darkness, reigniting his will to live. Eventually, he determined it was the neighboring prisoner. Abbé Faria was digging an escape tunnel. After meeting Faria, Dantes' fate took a dramatic turn. This abbé was extraordinary, immensely knowledgeable with exceptional analytical abilities. Dantes learned from the abbé while digging the tunnel with him. Years later, Dantes had transformed from a rough sailor into an erudite gentleman. Through Faria's analysis, Dantes finally understood his imprisonment, Danglars and Fernand's betrayal, and Prosecutor Villefort imprisoning him to conceal his father's conspiracy. Dantes could barely contain his hatred. Eager for revenge, he and Abbé Faria accelerated their tunnel digging. But then the abbé suddenly fell ill, knowing he didn't have long to live. So before dying, he told Dantes a huge secret. He had a staggering fortune buried on an island called Monte Cristo. Dante stayed by his side, grieving. He remained by the old man's side until he passed away. Before the guards came to collect the body, Dantes moved the abbé through the tunnel to his own cell bed, then quickly returned to the adjacent cell and hid in the body bag. The guards, completely unaware, carried Dantes out and threw him into the sea as per routine. Dantès finally escaped prison and gained his freedom. After 14 years in Château d'If, Dantes found the immense treasure on Monte Cristo Island. Assuming the identity of the Count of Monte Cristo, he embarked on his journey of gratitude and revenge. Besides the deceased Abbé Faria, Dantes had another benefactor, a kind shipowner. When Dantes was imprisoned, this man fought for justice and cared for Dantes's elderly father until his death. Sadly, the shipowner later went bankrupt. Dante repaid him by clearing all debts and buying his family a new cargo ship. Dantes then turned to revenge against his three enemies. The book's most thrilling section. During Dantes's imprisonment, all three enemies had risen to power and prominence. Former crewman Danglars owned a bank. Romantic rival Fernand became a general and noble parliamentarian, while Villefort rose to chief prosecutor. Their wealth and status made revenge extremely challenging. But the Count masterfully exposed their darkest crimes, using his wealth to deliver crushing blows. First target, Fernand, Dantes's former romantic rival. After Dantes's imprisonment, Fernand quickly married Mercedes and now lived wealthy in Paris. Through investigation, the Count discovered Fernand had murdered his benefactor Ali Pasha and family in Greece to facilitate a deal with the Turks. Soon, Parisian newspapers exposed Fernand's betrayal and murder of Ali Pasha, causing an uproar. Official investigations followed, revealing the truth and destroying Fernand's reputation. Fernand's son, Albert, wants to duel the Count to defend his father. But Mercedes tells Albert the truth about how Fernand framed Dantes years ago. After realizing his father's true nature, Albert abandons the duel and leaves with his mother. Fernand, abandoned by everyone, shoots himself. Danglars is the second enemy. He was a crew member on Dantès' ship, who, out of jealousy for Dantès' promotion, teamed up with Fernand to frame him. Now, Danglars owns a bank. The Count first secures a guarantee from the Bank of Rome, then flashes 1,000,000 francs. He opens 3 unlimited overdraft accounts at Danglars' bank, accounts that allow unrestricted withdrawals. After intimidating Danglars, the Count bribes a telegraph clerk to send a false military report, causing Danglars to sell bonds at a huge loss. With the bank on the verge of collapse, the Count learns that Madame Danglars and Villefort have an illegitimate son who has murdered someone and is now on the run. Cunning, deceptive ploy, he rescues the son and disguises him as the son of an Italian prince, pretending to introduce him helpfully to Danglars, saying he can save the bank. Danglars hastily marries his daughter off to this so-called prince's son. At the daughter's wedding, gendarmes suddenly appear and arrest the fugitive on the spot. Danglars is publicly disgraced, fails to save the bank, and his reputation is further tarnished. In despair, punitive ordeal, Danglars steals 5,000,000 francs from a charity and flees to Italy. On the way, the Count's bandit friends capture him and refuse him food unless he pays 100,000 francs per meal. When all 5 million francs are spent, the Count finally appears and reveals his identity. And Danglars is terrified out of his mind, but the Count ultimately spares his life. The last enemy is Villefort. Dantès delivers a double blow to him. First, regarding his illegitimate son. Villefort had an illegitimate son with Madame Danglars. To protect his career, Villefort attempted to bury the child alive, but he was rescued and became the murderer posing as the Italian prince's son mentioned earlier. The Count used this illegitimate son as a key player in his revenge against Danglars, and also arranged for him to appear in the revenge against Villefort. The illegitimate son was brought to court for trial, and the prosecutor was Villefort himself. Under the Count's arrangement, the prisoner declared in court that he was Villefort's illegitimate son, causing Villefort great panic. The second blow concerned his wife and children. To secure her son's inheritance, Madame de Villefort poisoned Villefort's former in-laws and attempted to poison Valentine, his daughter from his first marriage. The Count secretly protected and saved Valentine. When Villefort learned of his wife's poisoning, he was furious. Out of fear, Madame de Villefort poisoned herself and their young son. Then the Count appeared before Villefort, revealing this was all his revenge plan. Villefort couldn't withstand the blows and went insane. Having achieved his revenge, the Count of Monte Cristo left Paris to travel the world. That's the main storyline of the Count of Monte Cristo. For a popular novel, what it writes about certainly matters, but how it's written matters more. Otherwise, with so many revenge stories, why has the Count of Monte Cristo stood out and remained popular for over a century? This owes to Dumas' genius writing technique, especially in brilliantly weaving Dantès' prison experience. It contains rich elements, a coming-of-age story, prison escape, treasure hunt, and more. Dumas masterfully wove these plots with one stroke, profoundly influencing later generations. Take the coming-of-age story. Dante's enlightenment in prison stemmed from his encounter with Abbé Faria. As the novel writes, the abbé's knowledge was like a meteor flash. It illuminated new horizons instantly. Over years, Dantes learned Greek, Spanish, English, and German, mastered history, mathematics, physics, and understood the world's complexity and human wickedness. During 14 years at Chateau d'If, Dantes completed his metamorphosis into a new man. This rebirth through adversity template became a model for later writers. For example, in Jin Young's The Return of the Condor Heroes, after Youngglow loses his arm, he retreats to a valley to heal. Guided by the divine condor, he obtains Dugu Chubai's heavy iron sword and martial arts manual. Training daily under the condor's supervision, he achieves unparalleled skills. His plot follows Dantes's pattern, but since Dugu Chubai had died, the divine condor replaces the mentor, adding mystery. The magical condor completes a brilliant evolution. The prison escape story is a key element spanning almost Dante's entire imprisonment at Chateau d'If. This story involves the construction of multiple plot lines. First comes escape preparation. Dantes meets Abbé Faria, finds hope and despair, and together they dig an escape tunnel. Their tools were just a chisel, small knife, and wooden lever. They ground excavated soil and rocks into powder. They tossed it from the cell window, letting night winds carry it away without leaving traces. This lasted a year and 3 months until the tunnel was ready. Then, as the abbé lay dying, Dantes executed a clever bait-and-switch escape. The multi-layered plot techniques profoundly influenced later works, like using simple tools for tunnel escapes. It's perfectly recreated in The Shawshank Redemption. As for handling excavated soil, Dantes ground and scattered it from his window. In the movie, the protagonist drops soil down his pants during yard time. Dantes escapes by plunging into the sea from an island. Hollywood's Papillon recreates this, with a prisoner jumping off a cliff, clutching coconut shells, swimming desperately ashore. This story established classic templates for popular fiction. For example, there's always an incomplete, hard-to-decipher treasure map, just like the Abbe's fragmented map. Through investigation, the Count learned Fernand murdered his benefactor Ali Pasha in Greece to facilitate a deal with the Turks. Parisian newspapers soon exposed Fernand's betrayal and murder of Ali Pasha, causing a sensation. Official investigations later revealed the truth, ruining Fernand's reputation. Fernand's son Albert challenged the Count to a duel to defend his father, but Mercedes revealed how Fernand framed Dante. Seeing his father's true nature, Albert abandoned the duel and left with his mother. Abandoned, Fernand shot himself. Danglars is the second enemy. He was Dante's crewmate, who conspired with Fernand out of jealousy over Dante's promotion. He opened 3 unlimited overdraft accounts at Danglars' bank, accounts allowing unrestricted withdrawals. After intimidating Danglars, the Count bribed a telegraph clerk to send false military news, causing Danglars to sell bonds at a massive loss. As the bank neared collapse, the Count learned of Madame Danglars and Villefort's illegitimate son, a murderer on the run. He rescued him, disguised him as an Italian prince's son, and introduced him to Danglars as someone who could save the bank. Danglars hastily married his daughter to this so-called prince's son. At the wedding, gendarmes suddenly appeared and arrested the fugitive on the spot. Danglars was publicly shamed, failed to save the bank, and his reputation worsened. In despair, Danglars stole 5 million francs from charity and fled to Italy. The Count's bandit friends captured him, demanding 100,000 francs per meal until his money ran out. When all 5 million francs were gone, the Count finally appeared and revealed his identity. Terrified beyond reason, Danglars was ultimately spared by the Count. The final enemy was Villefort. Dantès delivered a double blow to him, first regarding his illegitimate son. Villefort had an illegitimate son with Madame Danglars. To protect his career, he attempted to bury the infant alive, but the child was rescued and became the murderer, posing as the Italian prince's son. The Count used this illegitimate son as a key player against Danglars and arranged his appearance in Villefort's downfall. When tried in court, the prosecutor was none other than Villefort himself. Under the Count's arrangement, the prisoner declared in court he was Villefort's son, causing panic. The second blow targeted Villefort's wife and children. To secure her son's inheritance, Madame de Villefort poisoned Villefort's former in-laws and attempted to poison Valentine, his daughter. The Count secretly protected Valentine. When Villefort discovered her crimes, his fury drove her to poison herself and their young son out of fear. At this moment, the Count appears before Villefort, explaining that this is all his revenge plan. And Villefort couldn't withstand the blows and went insane. Having achieved his revenge, the Count of Monte Cristo left Paris to travel the world. That's the main storyline of the Count of Monte Cristo. For a popular novel, what it writes about certainly matters, but how it's written matters more. Otherwise, with so many revenge stories, why has the Count of Monte Cristo stood out and remained popular for over a century? This owes to Dumas's genius writing technique, especially in brilliantly weaving Dantès' prison experience. It contains rich elements: a coming-of-age story, prison escape, treasure hunt, and more. Dumas masterfully wove these plots with one stroke, profoundly influencing later generations. Take the coming-of-age story. Dante's enlightenment in prison stemmed from his encounter with Abbe Faria. As the novel writes, the Abbe's knowledge was like a meteor flash. It illuminated new horizons instantly. Over years, Dantès learned Greek, Spanish, English, and German, mastered history, mathematics, physics, and understood the world's complexity and human wickedness. During 14 years at Chateau d'If, Dantes completed his metamorphosis into a new man. This rebirth through adversity template became a model for later writers. For example, in Jin Yang's The Return of the Condor Heroes, after Yang Guo loses his arm, he retreats to a valley to heal. Um, Guided by the divine condor, he obtains Dugu Chubai's heavy iron sword and martial arts manual. Training daily under the condor's supervision, he achieves unparalleled skills. This plot follows Dante's pattern, but since Dugu Chubai had died, the divine condor replaces the mentor, adding mystery. The magical condor completes a brilliant evolution. The prison escape story is a key element spanning almost Dante's entire imprisonment at Chateau d'If. This story involves the construction of multiple plot lines. First comes escape preparation. Dante's meets Abbe Faria, finds hope in despair, and together they dig an escape tunnel. Their tools were just a chisel, small knife, and wooden lever. They ground excavated soil and rocks into powder. They tossed it from the cell window, letting night winds carry it away without leaving traces. This lasted a year and 3 months, until the tunnel was ready. Then, as the abbé lay dying, Dantes executed a clever bait-and-switch escape. The multi-layered plot techniques profoundly influenced later works, like using simple tools for tunnel escapes. It's perfectly recreated in The Shawshank Redemption. As for handling excavated soil, Dantes ground and scattered it from his window. In the movie, the protagonist drops soil down his pants during yard time. Dantes escaped by plunging into the sea from an island. Hollywood's Papillon recreates this with a prisoner jumping off a cliff, clutching coconut shells, swimming desperately ashore. The treasure hunt story established classic templates for popular fiction. For example, there's always an incomplete, hard-to-decipher treasure map, just like the Abbé's fragmented map. Dante's classic transformation lies in his evolution from an innocent youth to a ruthless avenger. The power of his revenge persona comes from embodying justice, punishing evil and upholding righteousness, which profoundly shocks society. Dantes's revenge has several defining characteristics. First, his journey toward vengeance evolved from ignorance to absolute resolve. Young Dantes was naive and kind-hearted. He saw no danger in delivering Napoleon's letter, treated romantic rival Fernand amiably, unaware of Fernand's malice. When Gendrons took him to Chateau d'If, he cried, "Heavens, Chateau d'If, what are we going there for?" Imprisoned, he endlessly relived the past, questioning why this befell him. The turning point came with Abbe Faria, who asked, "Who benefits from your disappearance?" Dantes replied, "I'm insignificant. No one would profit." The Abbe said, "You must understand, everything is interconnected." Through this analysis, Danglars, Fernand, and Villefort's conspiracy was exposed. Dantes had an epiphany, stayed awake all night, and made his terrifying vow of vengeance. When the Abbe told Dantes about the boundless treasure on Monte Cristo, he said, "In this age, what great things one can do for friends with millions of francs." But upon hearing this, Dante's expression darkened, because what he thought was how much suffering one could inflict on enemies with millions of francs. Secondly, compared to Shakespeare's Hamlet, where the prince's revenge is hesitant and indecisive, the count's revenge, however, is decisive, meticulous, and even cruel. After prison, Dantes becomes the Count of Monte Cristo, a quintessential lone hero. He said, "Suddenly, from imprisonment, loneliness, and suffering, I regained light and freedom, possessing an immense fortune. If I didn't realize that God intended me to use that fortune to execute a great plan, I must be blind." He saw himself as the embodiment of the god of vengeance. When first meeting Villefort in Paris, he spoke of the criminal laws of various nations. Natural law, compared to the law of revenge, is the law of primitive peoples and the one most aligned with God's law. He said, "I am a corpse that crawled out of the grave, returning to the world only to fulfill a mission of revenge." Calmly, he described execution methods to nobles, noting Roman guillotines never malfunctioned like French ones. He recounted how one beheading took 30 blows to complete, horrifying his listeners. Witnessing an actual beheading in Rome, one young noble fainted, another shut his eyes tight, while the count stood straight, triumphant like an angel of vengeance. The count's meticulous planning and ruthless revenge sometimes led him to use any means necessary. Visiting Madame de Villefort, he discovered her plot to kill Valentine and the in-laws for inheritance. He then steered conversation toward poisons, sparking her interest when she worried about arsenic traces. The Count introduced her to a wondrous substance, a remedy in small doses but a poison in larger amounts. 1 drop could heal, 5 or 6 drops could kill. Remarkably, when added to wine, it wouldn't alter the scent at all. This guidance was terrifying. After obtaining the poison, Madame de Villefort used it to kill Villefort's former in-laws. Valentine only survived because the Count intervened. Here, the Count's revenge had reached a stage of harming innocence. He began facing moral dilemmas, wrestling with his conscience, facing Villefort's family tragedy, especially the corpse of Villefort's 10-year-old son. The Count turned pale. Realizing he'd gone too far, he frantically checked the child's pulse, trying to save him. But it was too late. The Count collapsed to the ground in anguish. The Count returned to Chateau d'If in that grim dungeon, staring at the place that imprisoned him for 14 years. He shouted, "Damn those who put me in this hellish prison!" The Count tried reigniting his vengeful conviction this way, but his resolve was already shaken. Ultimately, the Count spared Danglars' life. He confronted Danglars. "I'm the man you betrayed and slandered. You caused my fiancée to marry another, trampled me as your stepping stone to wealth, and starved my father to death. I sentenced you to die by starvation, but I spare you because I too need forgiveness. I am Edmond Dantès, a cruel avenger who chose forgiveness. This is my inner battle's resolution and my soul's redemption." Thus we see, though ruthless in revenge, the Count always maintained moral principles. While pursuing vengeance, he also saved Valentine and her lover. Now immensely wealthy, respected, and influential, he used wealth solely for revenge, never seeking higher status. He could easily have surpassed Fernand, Danglars, and Villefort in power, but after fulfilling his revenge, he simply departed with Heidi to travel the world. Aboard a ship sailing toward the horizon, the Count left only his towering silhouette. Though the novel ends happily, the Count's profound complexity gives the conclusion tragic grandeur. The soul of this story that remains powerfully moving after a century. In China, the Count of Monte Cristo is equally beloved. In the 1980s, its sales surged. People's Literature Publishing House alone sold 1 million copies. Many Chinese writers have been influenced by it. As Jin Yang said, "My novels indeed follow Dumas' style. Among all writers worldwide, Dumas remains my favorite," writer Yu Hua once shared. "When I first read The Count of Monte Cristo, I couldn't eat, sleep, or stop until I finished it." A popular novel earns such acclaim through its twisting plot, pure values of justice, and its message about waiting and hope. Protagonist Dantès, framed and imprisoned, fell from heaven to hell overnight. In darkness and death's shadow, he met the abbé, reversing his fate. He escaped prison, transformed into the Count, and struck back at his enemies, a resurrection powered by hope. In his final letter to Valentine, the Count wrote, "Only after suffering death's pain can one appreciate life's joy. All human wisdom lies in 4 words, wait and hope." The Count's life philosophy. Dumas' vision of light beyond despair still moves readers deeply today. In this sense, The Count of Monte Cristo stands as a great work of popular literature. Future readers will continue to be captivated and awed by its enchanting story.